The Intersystem Diplomatic Academy floated in the darkness of space like a giant wheel of light and metal. Inside its curved corridors, students from dozens of alien worlds walked together, learning to understand each other's cultures and ways of thinking. The Academy was famous across the galaxy for teaching young diplomats how to work with species completely different from their own. It was a place where fear was supposed to be conquered through knowledge and understanding. Jake Morrison walked through the bustling hallway with his datapad tucked under one arm. He was 22 years old, with brown hair that never quite stayed in place and an easy smile that made others feel comfortable around him. He was one of only 3 humans currently studying at the Academy, and after 6 months he had adjusted well to life among aliens. His classmates found him pleasant and adaptable, always willing to learn about their customs and never showing the disgust or fear that some species felt toward each other. He spotted his friend Vrel waiting near the entrance to their xenopsychology classroom. Vrel was a chithar, an insectoid species with compound eyes that reflected light in rainbow patterns and mandibles that clicked when he was nervous. Right now, those mandibles were clicking rapidly. "You are late," Vrel said, his translator device converting his native language into words Jake could understand. "Professor Dulmar does not appreciate tardiness." "I'm not late, you're just early," Jake replied with a grin. "You're always early when you're worried about something." Vrel's antennae twitched in what Jake had learned was the equivalent of a human fidgeting. "Today is the announcement about the final examination. I have heard rumors." Before Jake could ask what rumors, another voice called out, "Morrison Chithar, stop blocking the entrance." It was Kessa, a saurine whose reptilian features and scaled skin marked her as a member of one of the galaxy's warrior cultures. She stood nearly 7 feet tall with golden eyes that missed nothing. Despite her intimidating appearance, she had become one of Jake's closest friends at the Academy. The 3 of them entered the classroom together and took their usual seats. The room was designed to accommodate various body types, with adjustable furniture that could support everything from Vrel's 6-legged stance to the floating cushions preferred by gaseous species. Around them, other students settled in, representing a dozen different worlds and evolutionary paths. Professor Dulmar entered precisely on time. The Quellan was an amphibian species, with moist green skin and large eyes that could look in multiple directions at once. He had been teaching xenopsychology for 40 years and had a reputation for being both brilliant and demanding. "Students," Professor Dulmar began without preamble. "For the past 3 months, we have studied fear responses across different species. You have learned about evolutionary triggers, survival instincts, and how culture shapes what terrifies us." He paused, his throat sac inflating slightly. "Today I announce your final examination." The classroom went silent. Even the usual background hum of translators seemed to quiet. For years, this academy has used holographic simulations to help students confront species-specific fears, the professor continued. "However, this semester, we have been granted access to something far more effective." He manipulated his control panel and a holographic image appeared above his desk. It showed a large, dark creature with multiple limbs and rows of crystalline teeth. "Fear beasts." Shocked murmurs rippled through the classroom. Jake looked at Vrel, whose mandibles had gone completely still, which meant he was terrified. Even Kessa's scales had darkened slightly, a stress response Jake had learned to recognize. "Fear beasts," Professor Dulmar explained, "were created by an extinct civilization as biological weapons. They were designed to trigger primal terror in any sentient species they encountered. They are perfectly safe due to neural inhibitors, but their presence will activate your deepest survival instincts. Each of you will spend 5 minutes in a controlled environment with a fear beast. Your ability to manage your fear response will determine your grade." A student near the back, a Draxian named Zorn with crystalline skin that refracted light, spoke up. "Professor, my species has faced extinction-level threats. We do not fear simple beasts." Professor Dulmar's expression did not change. "We shall see. The fear beast adapts its presence to each species. What terrifies a Draxian may not terrify a Quellan, and vice versa. That is why they were such effective weapons." Jake raised his hand. "Professor, what about humans? We're pretty new to the galactic community. Is there data on how we react to these things?" For the first time, Professor Dulmar hesitated. "That is an excellent question, Jake Morrison. There is no documented case of human interaction with fear beasts. However, based on psychological profiles of your species, we anticipate a moderate to strong fear response. You should be adequately challenged but not overwhelmed. The rest of the class period was spent discussing logistics and safety protocols. The examination would take place in 3 days, giving students time to prepare mentally. Some species had meditation techniques to manage fear. Others relied on breathing exercises or chemical supplements. Jake noticed that many of his classmates looked genuinely frightened, not just of the examination, but of the creature they would face. After class, Vrel caught up with Jake in the hallway. "You do not seem concerned," the Chether observed. Jake shrugged. "I guess I'll worry about it when I see the thing. No point stressing now." "Your species has an unusual relationship with fear," Kessa added, joining them. "I have studied human military history. You run toward danger as often as you run from it." "We're just stubborn," Jake said with a laugh. "Besides, how bad can it be? It's restrained, it can't actually hurt us, and we can leave whenever we want." "It's just 5 minutes." Vrel's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You have not felt true fear then. When every instinct in your body screams to flee, when your mind cannot think past the need to escape, 5 minutes becomes an eternity." Over the next 3 days, the atmosphere at the academy changed. Students who were usually confident became quiet and withdrawn. Jake tried to study the available information on fear beasts, but there was not much detail. The extinct civilization that created them had left few records, and most of what was known came from archaeological findings. The creatures had been discovered in stasis pods on a dead world, preserved for thousands of years. When reactivated under controlled conditions, they proved to be exactly what the fragmentary record suggested: living embodiments of fear. The day of the examination arrived. Jake's class gathered outside the special testing chamber, a reinforced room in the lower levels of the academy station. Through the observation windows, they could see the examination space, circular, about 50 feet across, with smooth walls and several exit doors marked in bright yellow. In the center stood a large cylindrical container, frosted over with ice. Inside, barely visible, was a dark shape. Professor Dolmar stood on the observation deck with several other faculty members. "We will proceed in groups organized by species compatibility," he announced. First, the Quellen students. 3 of Professor Dolmar's own species entered the chamber nervously. The temperature in the observation area seemed to drop as the containment cylinder began to open. Mist poured out and the dark shape inside moved. Jake pressed closer to the glass, trying to see clearly. The creature that emerged was difficult to describe. It seemed to shift and change depending on who was looking at it. To the Quellen students, it appeared massive and crushing, with too many limbs reaching in all directions. The 3 students lasted less than 2 minutes before fleeing through the exit doors. They emerged trembling, their skin several shades paler than normal. Professor Dolmar marked their times on his datapad with an approving nod. Group after group followed. Each time, the fear beast seemed to become something different, something specifically designed to terrify whoever was watching. When Vrel's group entered, Jake watched his friend's compound eyes dilate in terror. The creature became something swift and invasive, triggering every Chithar instinct about contamination and parasites. Vrel barely lasted 90 seconds. Kessa and the other Saurine warriors did better, managing nearly 4 minutes, but even they emerged with pale scales and extended claws, their warrior pride barely intact. The boastful Zorn lasted only 45 seconds, his crystalline skin flickering with patterns of stress and shame. Finally, Professor Dolmar called Jake's name. Because there were no other humans in the class to group with, he would face the fear beast alone. Jake walked to the entrance of the chamber, aware of all his classmates pressing against the observation glass behind him. He could see Vrel's worried expression and Kessa's analytical gaze. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. The chamber door sealed behind him with a solid click. He was alone in the circular space, facing the frosted containment cylinder. His heart beat faster, not from fear but from anticipation and uncertainty about what was coming. Releasing full containment, Professor Dolmar's voice announced through speakers, "Jake Morrison, you may exit at any time if the fear becomes unmanageable." The cylinder retracted completely. For the first time, the fear beast was fully active and free to move throughout the entire chamber. Ice crystals fell away as the creature unfurled itself. Stand. The fear beast moved across the chamber floor with fluid grace, each step deliberate and measured. Jake stood his ground, watching the creature approach. He waited for the overwhelming terror that had driven his classmates from the room. He waited for his instincts to scream at him to run. He waited for his heart to pound with panic. Instead, he felt only curiosity and a cautious respect, the same feeling he might have when encountering a large dog he did not know. The creature circled him slowly, its eyeless head tilting at angles that should have been unsettling. The bioluminescent patterns along its spine shifted from purple to blue, then to green. Jake realized it was trying different approaches, attempting to trigger whatever fear response should exist in his species. Nothing worked. He felt his pulse was elevated, sure, but from alertness rather than terror. Jake Morrison. Professor Dulmar's voice came through the speakers, sounding uncertain. Please assess your fear level on a scale from 1 to 10. Jake considered the question honestly. Maybe a 3. Like meeting a big animal, I don't know. Careful but not scared. Silence followed his answer. Through the observation glass, Jake could see the shocked faces of his classmates pressed against the window. Rel's mandibles hung open in disbelief. Even Kessa looked surprised, her golden eyes wide. The fear beast stopped circling. It stood directly in front of Jake, close enough that he could feel warmth radiating from its body. The creature's form flickered slightly, as if trying one last time to find the right shape to frighten him. When that failed, something unexpected happened. The aggressive posture melted away. The raised spines along its back lowered. The threatening stance relaxed. Then, moving slowly, the fear beast leaned its massive head against Jake's leg. A deep rumbling sound filled the chamber. It took Jake a moment to recognize what he was hearing. The fear beast was purring. The sound vibrated through the floor and into his bones, steady and rhythmic like a cat's purr, but much, much deeper. The bioluminescent patterns shifted to a warm amber color that somehow felt peaceful. Jake stood frozen, unsure what to do. This was clearly not part of the expected examination procedure. Through the observation glass, he could see chaos erupting among the faculty. Professor Dulmar was frantically checking instruments. Other teachers rushed into the control room. Students were chattering in a dozen different languages, their translators creating a storm of confused noise. "This is impossible," he heard someone say through the speakers before the channel was muted. Carefully, Jake extended his hand toward the creature's head. The fear beast immediately nuzzled into his palm, pressing against it the way a dog might seek affection. Its fur-scale covering was surprisingly soft and warm. The purring intensified, and Jake found himself instinctively scratching behind what he assumed were the creature's ears, or sensory organs. The beast made a pleased sound and leaned more heavily against him. "Jake Morrison, do not move," Professor Dulmar commanded, though his voice carried more confusion than authority. "We are attempting to understand what is happening." "I don't think anything's wrong," Jake said, continuing to pet the creature. "I think it just likes me." This statement caused another wave of agitation in the observation deck. Jake could hear Vrel's translator insisting that such behavior was biologically impossible. The fear beast had been engineered specifically to terrify sentient beings. It should not be capable of affection or bonding. Yet here it was, acting like an oversized pet seeking attention from a friendly human. Kessa's voice cut through the commotion. "Look at its body language. All threat indicators are gone. It has adopted a submissive posture toward the human. In predator behavior, this means it recognizes a superior pack member." Professor Dulmar made a decision. "We are extending the observation period. Jake Morrison, if you feel comfortable, please remain in the chamber. Faculty specialists are being summoned." What was supposed to be a 5-minute examination stretched to 15 minutes, then 30. Jake, uncertain but finding the situation oddly pleasant, sat down on the chamber floor. The fear beast immediately lay down beside him, its large body curling protectively around him. Within minutes, the creature appeared to fall asleep, its purring becoming a steady rhythm. Jake found himself absently running his hand along its spine, and the bioluminescent patterns pulsed in contentment with each stroke. "So can I leave now? Or am I stuck here?" Jake called out to the observation deck. More time passed. The other students were eventually dismissed to their next classes, though many lingered to watch the unprecedented scene. Vrel refused to leave entirely, worried for his friend despite the apparent safety. Kessa stayed as well, fascinated by what she was witnessing. They watched as Jake and the fear beast simply rested together, the creature's massive head pillowed on Jake's lap. Dr. Helena Price arrived within the hour. She was one of the few other humans at the academy, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and silver-streaked hair, pulled back in a practical bun. She was the head xenobiologist and had spent 20 years studying alien life forms across the galaxy. Even she stopped short when she saw what was happening in the chamber. "In 2 decades of research," she said slowly, staring through the observation glass, "I have never seen anything like this. Fear beasts do not bond. They do not show affection. They are engineered psychic predators designed to trigger survival instincts in any sentient species." Professor Dulmar pulled up holographic displays showing records from dozens of species. In every single documented case, the pattern was identical: overwhelming fear from the sentient being and aggressive threat behavior from the beast. Until today, until a human had walked into that chamber. "What makes humans different?" asked one of the other faculty members, a gaseous being whose translator made their voice sound like wind chimes. Dr. Price moved closer to the glass, studying both Jake and the creature. "We need to understand human evolution," she said. "Humans come from what the galactic community classifies as a death world. Earth has extreme conditions: violent weather, dangerous seismic activity, high gravity, and an unusual number of predatory species. Humans did not evolve as apex predators through strength or natural weapons. They evolved through endurance and adaptability, and most importantly, through their ability to form bonds with other species." She brought up images on a holographic display, showing various Earth animals. Humans domesticated wolves. These were predators that should have been competitors or threats. Instead, humans turned them into companions and partners. "We call them dogs now, and they are considered family members in human society." But it did not stop there. Humans have befriended cats, which are small predators that provide no practical benefit. They work with horses, which are large prey animals that could easily kill a human. They have even formed bonds with birds of prey, with snakes, with dozens of species that other intelligent races would simply avoid or eliminate. "But this is a fear beast," Professor Dulmar protested. "It was specifically engineered to cause terror." "Exactly," Dr. Price said, her excitement growing. "Look at its design. Large predator build, fur or scale covering, 4-legged locomotion with additional limbs, multiple threat displays. To most species in the galaxy, this is a nightmare. But to a human, this is basically a very exotic dog. The proportions are right. The body language, when it is relaxed, matches patterns humans have been reading in animals for thousands of years. When this creature stopped trying to be threatening and started showing submission signals, Jake's instincts did not see a monster. They saw a potential friend. The implications of this observation spread through the gathered faculty like ripples in water. Humans had evolved on a world so dangerous that they needed allies. Not just allies among their own kind, but across species boundaries. They developed an instinct not to flee from predators automatically, but to assess whether those predators could be befriended. It was a survival strategy that apparently no other spacefaring species had developed. In the chamber, Jake had dozed off, his head resting against the fear beast's warm bulk. The creature slept deeply, its purring creating a peaceful soundtrack. Both human and beast were completely relaxed, comfortable in each other's presence in a way that should have been impossible. "What do we do now?" Professor Dulmar asked quietly. Dr. Price watched the sleeping pair. "Protocol says we should sedate the creature and return it to the research facility. But look at them. That fear beast is more content than any specimen on record, and Jake has formed a bond. Separating them now would be cruel." "The creature is not his property," another faculty member pointed out. "It belongs to the research facility that loaned it to us." "Then we need to figure something out," Dr. Price said firmly. "Because this situation just changed everything we thought we knew about fear beasts, about humans, and about the nature of interspecies bonding." As the faculty debated, Jake slept on, unaware that his simple act of not being afraid had just sparked a controversy that would spread across the entire galactic community. Beside him, the fear beast dreamed whatever dream such creatures might have, its amber glow pulsing gently in the dim chamber light. The decision to wake Jake and the fear beast came several hours later, after the faculty had exhausted their initial theories and arguments. Dr. Price entered the chamber alone, moving slowly and keeping her body language relaxed. She had studied enough predator behavior to know that sudden movements near a bonded pair could trigger defensive responses. As soon as she crossed the threshold, the fear beast's eyes opened. Though Jake had said it had no visible eyes, it clearly perceived her presence. The warm amber glow along its spine shifted to yellow, then to orange. A low warning growl rumbled through the chamber. Jake woke instantly, confused by the sound. "Hey, it's okay," he said to the creature, placing a calming hand on its head. "That's Dr. Price. She's a friend." The beast watched the human woman carefully but stopped growling. The orange glow faded back to amber, though it remained alert. Dr. Price stopped a respectful distance away. "Jake, we need to run some tests." "Nothing invasive, just observations. Are you willing to help?" "Sure," Jake said, stretching stiff muscles from sleeping on the floor. "What do you need?" Over the next hour, they conducted careful experiments. When Jake tried to leave the chamber alone, the fear beast followed him to the doorway. The opening was too small for the creature to fit through, and it made a sound that could only be described as a whine, pressing against the barrier and clearly distressed. When Jake returned, the beast immediately calmed, nuzzling against him and resuming its purring. The relief in its body language was obvious even to the non-human observers. Dr. Price tried approaching Jake while the beast was nearby. The creature positioned itself between them, not aggressively but protectively. When Dr. Price backed away, it relaxed. When she asked Jake's permission to come closer and Jake granted it, the beast allowed her to approach but watched her carefully the entire time. "It is bonded to you," Dr. Price concluded. "Completely and deeply bonded. This should not be possible with a fear beast, but the evidence is undeniable." Jake scratched behind the creature's sensory organs, and it leaned into the touch. "I've been thinking about what to call it. Can't just keep saying the fear beast forever. I was thinking maybe Smokey, because of how its fur looks dark and kind of shimmers." Professor Dulmar, listening from the observation deck, sounded exasperated. "Jake Morrison, you cannot simply name a classified research specimen like it is a pet." "Why not?" Jake asked. "It clearly has preferences and feelings. Seems wrong to treat it like an object." News of the human and the fear beast spread quickly through the Academy station. By evening, the story had reached the communication networks that connected different worlds. Scientists from multiple species requested permission to observe the phenomenon. Some were fascinated by the implications for xenobiology and psychology. Others were deeply unsettled by what this meant about human nature and capabilities. A delegation from the Saurine Collective arrived the next day, including military advisors who viewed everything through the lens of tactical advantage. They stood in the observation room, watching Jake play with Smokey in the chamber below. The creature was chasing a ball that Jake had requested, pouncing on it with enthusiasm that looked remarkably similar to a large dog at play. "If humans can pacify fear beasts," one Saurine officer observed, "what other weapons might they neutralize? What other defenses could they bypass through this bonding ability?" Kessa, who had been granted permission to observe as Jake's classmate, spoke up. "With respect, sir, I do not believe my friend is thinking about military applications. He simply does not fear what others fear." The officer's scales rippled with skepticism. That itself is a tactical advantage. A species that does not fear faces threats differently than those who do. Dr. Price, who was also present, firmly addressed the military concerns. "This is not about weaponization. This is about understanding a fundamental aspect of human psychology that appears unique in the galaxy. Humans evolved to form bonds with predators because cooperation meant survival on their dangerous homeworld. That is not a weapon. That is simply how they are." Jake was moved to special quarters that could accommodate Smokey's size. The creature refused to be separated from him, becoming agitated whenever Jake was out of sight. The Academy administration, uncertain how to proceed, allowed the arrangement temporarily while they decided on a permanent solution. Vrel visited Jake in his new quarters, though the Chithar stayed near the door, still nervous around Smokey. The fear beast watched Vrel with interest but made no threatening moves, seemingly understanding that this small insectoid was important to Jake. "Your species is very strange," Vrel said, his mandibles clicking softly. "You see a creature designed to cause terror and you see a friend." Jake sat on the floor with Smokey's head in his lap. "I guess we just think differently. On Earth, we have a saying, every dog can be a good dog if you treat it right. Maybe that applies to more than just dogs. But this is not a dog," Vrel pointed out. "This is an engineered bioweapon." "Yeah, but nobody asked Smokey what it wanted to be," Jake replied, running his hand along the creature's spine. Maybe it's tired of being a weapon. Maybe it just wanted someone to be kind to it. Kessa visited as well, far more comfortable with Smokey's presence than Vrel. She walked right up to the creature and studied it with professional interest. "May I touch it?" she asked Jake. "Ask Smokey, not me," Jake said. Kessa extended her hand slowly toward the fear beast. Smokey sniffed at her scales, then gently bumped its head against her palm. The Saurine warrior smiled, a rare expression. "Remarkable. Such power and yet such gentleness. In my culture, warriors respect strength, but we also respect loyalty. This creature has both." The Academy's governing council called an emergency session to decide Smokey's fate. Jake was summoned to testify, and he brought Smokey with him. The sight of a human walking calmly through the station corridors with a fear beast padding beside him like an obedient companion caused quite a stir. Students and faculty alike pressed themselves against walls, giving them a wide berth. Some took recordings with their devices. Others simply stared in disbelief. The council chamber was a large circular room with seating arranged in tiers for representatives from various species. Jake stood in the center with Smokey beside him, feeling small under the weight of so many stares. Representatives from dozens of worlds looked down at him, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile to calculating. A Velen representative, a species known for their peaceful nature, spoke first. "Jake Morrison, we understand you have formed an attachment to this creature. However, fear beasts are classified as dangerous organisms. What assurance can you provide that it will not harm others?" Jake chose his words carefully. "Smokey has had plenty of opportunities to hurt people. It hasn't. It's protective of me, sure, but that's different from being aggressive. When Dr. Price approached with permission, Smokey allowed it. When my friends visit, it's gentle with them. It only shows defensive behavior when it thinks I'm threatened." A Krell representative, reptilian and cold-eyed, spoke next. "Your species is new to the galactic community. You do not understand the implications of what you have done. Fear beasts were created as weapons. By domesticating one, you demonstrate that humans can neutralize threats that keep other species in check. That's not what this is about," Jake protested. "I didn't set out to neutralize anything. I just wasn't scared," and Smokey responded to that. "I can't help how my species evolved." A Draxian representative, still embarrassed by Zorn's poor performance in the examination, spoke harshly. "Perhaps humans should be feared if they can befriend that which terrorizes others." This comment sparked heated debate among the council members. Some agreed that humans represented an unknown factor that could be dangerous. Others argued that the ability to form bonds across species lines was valuable, not threatening. The debate continued for over an hour while Jake stood in the center, growing increasingly uncomfortable. Smokey sensed his distress and pressed closer against his leg, offering silent support. Finally, an elderly Velen representative called for order. "Jake Morrison, answer this honestly. If we separate you from this creature, return it to research custody, what will you do?" Jake looked down at Smokey, who gazed back at him with that eyeless perception. He thought about the creature's contentment, its obvious happiness, the bond they had formed without either of them planning it. "I'll be sad," he admitted, "and I think Smokey will be sad too. But if that's what you decide, I'll accept it. I just ask that you treat Smokey well. It deserves kindness." The council members conferred among themselves in hushed tones. Jake could not hear what they were saying, but he saw disagreement in their body language. Some gestured emphatically. Others sat in rigid disapproval. The debate seemed endless. Then Dr. Price entered the chamber along with Professor Dulmar. They carried data displays and research findings. "Honored Council," Dr. Price began. "Before you make your decision, please review our findings. This situation is unprecedented and has significant scientific value. We propose a compromise solution." She presented her proposal. "Create a new field of study focused on human xenofauna bonding dynamics, with Jake as the first student in this program. His relationship with Smokey would become a case study, helping the galaxy understand this unusi." The council debated for 3 more days before reaching their decision. During that time, Jake continued living in his special quarters with Smokey, attending modified classes when possible, and submitting to various tests and observations. Researchers measured everything from his heart rate in Smokey's presence to the biochemical composition of the bond between them. The data they gathered was unprecedented and fascinating. Human stress hormones remained low around the fear beast, while bonding hormones similar to those found between humans and their pets on Earth were elevated. Smokey showed similar biochemical markers, suggesting the bond was genuine and mutual on a biological level. When the council finally announced their verdict, Jake was called back to the chamber with Smokey at his side. The representatives looked tired from their lengthy deliberations, but the elderly Velen who had questioned Jake before spoke with clarity and purpose. "Jake Morrison, this council has decided to allow you to maintain custody of the Fear Beast under specific conditions. You will enroll in a new academic program studying human xenofauna bonding dynamics. The creature will undergo regular behavioral assessments. You will be responsible for its actions and well-being. Should it demonstrate aggression toward any individual without just cause, this arrangement will be terminated immediately. Do you accept these terms?" Jake felt relief wash over him like a wave. "Yes, absolutely. Thank you," the Velen continued. "Furthermore, this council recognizes that this situation has implications beyond one student and one creature. Humanity has demonstrated a capability that may prove valuable to the galactic community. We encourage further research into this phenomenon." Not everyone on the council looked pleased with the decision. The Krell representative sat with arms crossed, clearly disapproving. The Draxian delegation whispered among themselves with agitated gestures. But the decision was made, and Jake was free to continue his studies with Smokey as his companion. Over the following weeks, life at the academy settled into a new normal. Jake's schedule was restructured to include intensive study in xenobiology, animal psychology, and interspecies communication. Dr. Price became his primary advisor, designing a curriculum that had never existed before. Jake found himself learning about evolutionary biology across dozens of worlds, studying predator-prey relationships, and analyzing the psychological basis for fear responses in different species. Smokey attended every class with him. Professors who had initially protested the presence of a fear beast in their classrooms gradually adapted. The creature was remarkably well behaved, usually sleeping quietly beside Jake's desk or at his feet. It never disturbed other students, never showed aggression, and seemed content to simply be near its human companion. The other students adapted too, though at different speeds. Frel still gave Smokey a wide berth, but his mandibles no longer clicked with fear when the creature was nearby. He even admitted to Jake one day that he found Smokey's loyalty admirable, even if he could not understand it. Kessa spent considerable time observing Smokey's behavior, incorporating her observations into her own studies of combat tactics and warrior psychology. She noted that the fear beast's protective instincts and threat assessment capabilities were remarkably sophisticated. An unexpected breakthrough came when Vrel accidentally dropped his datapad during a shared study session. The device clattered across the floor and stopped near Smokey's head. Vrel froze, his compound eyes wide with apprehension. Smokey raised its head, gently picked up the datapad in its crystalline teeth without damaging it, and walked over to place it carefully in front of the trembling Chithar, before returning to lie beside Jake. Vrel stared at the datapad, then at Smokey, then at Jake. "It helped me," he said, his translator conveying his astonishment. "The fear beast helped me." "Smokey," Jake corrected gently. "And yeah, that's what friends do." That incident marked a turning point in how the Academy community viewed Smokey. The creature was no longer seen purely as a dangerous specimen being studied. It was becoming recognized as an individual with its own personality and capacity for kindness. Students who had avoided the corridors when Jake and Smokey passed by began to nod in greeting instead. Some even asked if they could touch the creature, and when Jake said to ask Smokey directly, they learned that the fear beast could be remarkably gentle when approached with respect. However, not all attention was positive. News of Jake and Smokey had spread beyond the Academy to the wider galactic community, and not everyone was pleased. Some species saw the human-fear-beast bond as proof that humans were dangerous and unpredictable. Opinion pieces appeared on galactic news networks, questioning whether humanity should be allowed to integrate fully into the interstellar community if they could befriend weapons-grade organisms. A group calling itself the Coalition for Natural Order began protesting at the Academy, demanding that Smokey be returned to stasis and that humans be subjected to additional psychological screening before being allowed to interact with xenofauna. Their protests were peaceful but vocal, and they attracted supporters from several species who felt threatened by what humans represented. Ambassador Richard Cole arrived at the Academy to address the growing controversy. He was Earth's representative to the Galactic Assembly, a seasoned diplomat with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He met with Jake privately in his quarters with Smokey present. The ambassador studied the fear beast with professional curiosity before turning his attention to Jake. "You have caused quite a stir, young man," Ambassador Cole said, though his tone was not unkind. "The Galactic Assembly is divided on what your bond with this creature means for humanity's place in the interstellar community." "I didn't mean to cause problems," Jake said honestly. "I just wasn't scared when I was supposed to be." "I know," the ambassador replied. "And that is precisely what makes the situation so complex. You acted according to your nature, and your nature is fundamentally different from most species in the galaxy." He paused, watching Smokey settle its head in Jake's lap. "Some see that difference as threatening. Others see it as valuable. My job is to ensure that the valuable perspective wins out." The ambassador explained his plan. The research facility that had loaned Smokey to the Academy was demanding its return, claiming ownership rights. They were threatening legal action against both Jake and the Academy. However, Earth's government was prepared to make a substantial offer to purchase Smokey outright, along with funding continued research into fear beast biology and human xenofauna bonding. In exchange, Jake would serve as a representative of this new understanding, demonstrating to the galaxy that humanity's unique capabilities were beneficial rather than threatening. "What does that mean for me?" Jake asked, unconsciously stroking Smokey's spine, causing the creature's bioluminescent patterns to pulse with contentment. "It means your academic path just became more significant than you probably imagined," Ambassador Cole said. "You will complete your studies here, but your work will have diplomatic implications. The galaxy is watching to see if humans can be trusted with the unusual abilities they possess. You and Smokey are, whether you like it or not, ambassadors for your species." Jake looked down at Smokey, who gazed back at him with that eyeless perception that somehow conveyed trust and affection. "I never asked to be an ambassador." "Few people do," the ambassador said with a slight smile. "But sometimes circumstances choose us rather than the other way around. The question is whether you are willing to accept this responsibility." Jake thought about everything that had happened since he walked into that examination chamber. He thought about the bond he had formed with a creature that was supposed to terrify him. He thought about Vrel slowly overcoming his fear, and Kessa's growing respect for Smokey's capabilities. He thought about Dr. Price's excitement over the research possibilities and Professor Dulmar's grudging acceptance that sometimes the unexpected produce the most valuable lessons. If it means Smokey and I can stay together, and if it helps people understand that humans are not a threat just because we think differently, then yes, Jake said. "I'll do it." Ambassador Cole nodded with approval. "Good. Then let me tell you what happens next. The research facility has agreed to our offer. As of tomorrow, Smokey will legally belong to Earth's government, with you designated as the primary handler and caretaker. You will continue your studies here at the Academy in the new xenofauna bonding program. Additionally, we are proposing to the Galactic Assembly that other humans be allowed to participate in fear beast bonding trials to determine if your ability is unique or representative of your species as a whole." This last point caught Jake by surprise. "Other humans? With other fear beasts? If they are willing," the ambassador confirmed. "Dr. Price believes your case is not an anomaly, but rather evidence of a species-wide trait. Testing that theory will require more subjects. Several humans have already volunteered, including 2 other students here at the Academy." Jake felt a mixture of emotions at this news. Relief that he was not alone in this strange situation. Concern for other humans who might face the same scrutiny and controversy he had experienced. Curiosity about whether they would form bonds similar to his own with Smokey, and underneath it all, a growing understanding that The following months brought changes that rippled through both the Academy and the wider galactic community. 3 more fear beasts were brought out of stasis for bonding trials with human volunteers. 2 students from the Academy participated: Claire Bennett, who was studying xenobotany, and Marcus Webb, who specialized in interstellar communications. The 3rd volunteer was a young human engineer named Lisa Chang, who worked on the Academy's maintenance crew. Jake watched nervously as each trial took place, The results were remarkably consistent. Claire walked into the chamber and within minutes had the fear beast purring and leaning against her, much like Smokey had done with Jake. Marcus took slightly longer, but his fear beast eventually settled beside him with clear contentment. Lisa's trial was perhaps the most dramatic, because her fear beast was noticeably larger and more aggressive-looking than the others. Yet within 10 minutes she was sitting on the floor scratching its head while it made happy rumbling sounds. Dr. Price could barely contain her excitement as she compiled the data. This is not an anomaly. This is a species trait. Humans consistently fail to trigger the fear response that these creatures were designed to cause, and instead trigger bonding behavior. The implications are staggering. The 4 humans and their fear beasts became a common sight around the academy. Jake named his companion Smokey. Claire called hers Luna because of its silvery bioluminescent patterns. Marcus named his beast simply because he found it amusing. And Lisa chose the name Shadow for her large dark companion. The creatures developed distinct personalities. Luna was playful and curious, often investigating new objects or spaces with enthusiasm. Beast was calmer and more observant, seeming to analyze situations before acting. Shadow was protective and serious, rarely leaving Lisa's side and watching everyone with careful attention. Smokey remained the most social, comfortable around Jake's friends and willing to interact with other students who approached respectfully. The presence of 4 fear beasts living peacefully among students from dozens of species forced the galactic community to reconsider many assumptions. Research teams arrived to study the phenomenon from every angle. Evolutionary biologists wanted to understand how humans developed this capability. Psychologists studied the bonding mechanisms. Military strategists, despite Dr. Price's objections, analyzed the tactical implications. Even artists and philosophers came to observe, finding inspiration in the unlikely friendships between humans and creatures designed to embody fear. Vrel eventually overcame most of his anxiety around the fear beasts. The turning point came during a study session when Vrel's chair collapsed under him, a victim of faulty construction. He fell hard, his chitinous exterior cracking slightly, and he could not get up on his own due to the injury. Before Jake could reach him, Smokey was there, gently positioning itself so Vrel could use it for support to stand. The Chithar gripped Smokey's fur with trembling limbs, and the fear beast stood perfectly still until Vrel was stable. After that incident, Vrel began to see Smokey not as a monster, but as a helpful companion. Kessa took her observations of the fear beasts and incorporated them into her warrior training philosophy. She wrote a paper that became widely read in Saurine military academies, arguing that strength without bonds was incomplete strength. Her people, who prized individual combat prowess above all else, began to reconsider the value of companions and loyal partnerships. Some Saurine warriors even requested permission to attempt bonding with fear beasts themselves. Though these attempts were less successful than with humans, the fear beasts tolerated the Saurine, but did not form the deep bonds they showed with their human companions. As Jake's first year in the Xenofauna bonding program concluded, the Academy held a special ceremony to recognize the groundbreaking research. Students, faculty, and visiting dignitaries gathered in the main assembly hall. Jake, Claire, Marcus, and Lisa stood together with their fear beasts beside them. The sight of 4 humans with 4 massive creatures that should have been terrifying, but instead looked peaceful and content, had become almost normal to the Academy community. But visitors still stared in amazement. Professor Dalmar, who had initially been skeptical of the entire situation, addressed the assembly. When I designed the Fear Beast examination, I intended to teach students about confronting fear. Instead, I learned that fear itself is not universal. These humans have taught us that what one species perceives as a threat, another might perceive as a friend. This is a valuable lesson for our interstellar community. Dr. Price presented the research findings to the gathered audience, explaining in detail how human evolution on a death world had shaped their unique perspective on predators and danger. She showed data comparing human biochemical responses to those of other species, highlighting the differences in fear hormone production and bonding hormone levels. She concluded with a proposal that human xenofauna bonding programs be established on other worlds, potentially opening new approaches to wildlife management and interspecies relations across the galaxy. The academic community responded with enthusiasm, approving funding for expanded research and establishing formal programs at 3 other major institutions. The military community remained divided, with some species seeing opportunity and others seeing threat. The general public across various worlds was mostly fascinated, with images of humans and their fear-beast companions becoming popular on communication networks. Jake graduated with honors in the new field he had accidentally helped create. As he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, Smokey padded beside him wearing a ceremonial collar that designated it as an official Academy companion animal. The audience, which included representatives from dozens of species, applauded. Some were enthusiastic, others polite. A few remained skeptical, but all acknowledged that something significant had happened. After the ceremony, Jake stood with Vrel and Kessa on an observation deck overlooking the stars. Smokey lay beside him, content and peaceful. The three friends had grown close over their shared experiences, bonded by the unusual circumstances that had brought a human, a Chithar, and a Saurine together. "What will you do now?" Kessa asked. "You have graduated, but your work here seems unfinished." Jake had been thinking about this question for weeks. Ambassador Cole had made him an offer. Join Earth's diplomatic corps in a newly created position focused on xenofauna relations. The job would involve traveling to different worlds, helping with situations where dangerous creatures needed to be managed or relocated, and demonstrating humanity's unique capabilities to the broader galactic community. "I have an offer to work with the diplomatic corps," Jake explained. "They want me to help with xenofauna situations across the galaxy, places where dangerous animals are causing problems and the usual solution is extermination. They think humans might be able to find better solutions." Frel's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You would be good at this work. You see possibilities where others see only threats. Will you take Smokey with you?" Kessa asked. Jake looked down at his companion, running his hand along the familiar spine, watching the bioluminescent patterns pulse with contentment. "Of course. Smokey and I are partners now. Where I go, Smokey goes." The fear beast made a soft rumbling sound of agreement, pressing closer against Jake's leg. The bond between them had only grown stronger over the months, becoming as natural as breathing. Jake could read Smokey's moods and needs almost instinctively, and Smokey responded to Jake's emotions with understanding that went beyond simple training. "I think I will accept the position," Jake said, decision crystallizing as he spoke. "There are probably a lot of situations out there where a different perspective could help. And maybe along the way we can help people understand that humans are not dangerous just because we approach things differently." "When do you leave?" Frel asked, and there was sadness in his translated voice. 2 weeks, Jake replied. "First assignment is a colony world having conflicts with indigenous predators. The colonists want to eliminate them, but Earth's government thinks there might be a better way." Kessa nodded approvingly. "A worthy mission. You will need to be careful, though. Not everyone will welcome human interference even if your intentions are good." "I know," Jake said, "but I think it is worth trying." The three friends stood together in comfortable silence, watching stars wheel past the observation window. Smokey dozed peacefully, secure in the knowledge that its human was nearby. Jake reflected on how much had changed since that day he walked into an examination chamber, expecting a simple test of courage. He had found not just a companion but a purpose, not just a friend but a calling. 2 weeks later, Jake and Smokey boarded a transport ship heading toward the colony world of New Hebron. The ship's crew gave Smokey nervous looks at first, but by the end of the first day, they were cautiously approaching to ask questions and eventually to carefully pet the creature when Jake said it was allowed. As the ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, Jake settled into his quarters with Smokey curled up in the designated sleeping area. He reviewed the briefing materials about New Hebron's predator problem. The indigenous creatures were large, aggressive, and had been attacking colonist settlements. The local government wanted to organize hunting parties,